Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll get started in just a minute. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Earn more from the people resources you already have. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a little housekeeping. So this webinar will be recorded, and the slides and recording will be shared out with you via email within 48 hours of the webinar. Audio for the audience is off, but please do feel free to ask questions in the chat or Q&A panel, and we will answer them at the end. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our host, Lindy Thompson.
Thanks, Lauren. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about earning more from the people resources that you already have. I have an agenda for today, but we're going to start with welcoming and thanking our panel members, Rachel Chan from D'Absolute and David Lapanus from Thales. I'm Lindy Thompson. I am a product marketer from Certinia. I focus on the enterprise segment and the trends that we're seeing and how our solutions can solve for enterprise specific outcomes. So I'm going to have our panel introduce themselves. Let's start off with you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Lindy, and thank you for joining us today. I head up the Certinia professional services team here at D'Absolute. We're a partner with Certinia, and we really focus on solutions designed to level up the opportunity to renewal processes for our customers. So we have a lot of solutions that are designed around PSA, and not just PSA itself, but what's taking place upstream and downstream of that. And we're also a customer. So we use PSA and Certinia applications in-house, and we love applying some of our best practices and principles that we implement internally with our customers. So I'll be talking a little bit about that today.
Fabulous. Thank you, Rachel. And David.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining as well. So my name is David Lapanus. I work for the Cloud Protection and Licensing Division of the Thales Group. I'm based in South Florida. I head up the business efficiency and business analysis group for professional services at the global level within CPL. And we've been a fervent user of Certinia and professional services automation since about 2017. So our angle here obviously is one from a customer and user of the system in our daily operations of professional services.
Great. Thanks, David. Thanks for being here to you both. I'm going to jump right in. We're going to go over the survey that Certinia deployed in April of this year. We surveyed over 900 individuals across the United States who have been employed as a consultant. There's a fairly even split, as you can see, between senior management and those people who work for them. Nearly half of the respondents reported to be what we would term moderately billable, so 50 to 75% billable, while a similar number, about 44%, reported to be over 75% billable. So overall, our respondents had strong opinions on everything from why they do the work they do to how their employees their employers can be more effective about reaching business goals. A striking takeaway was the connected vision between senior management and those who work for them on what strategic moves would give their businesses the best success, the best chances at success. So, oops, my apologies. It's important to know what our employees expect from their roles, right? And so long-term success of services businesses depend on employee engagement and satisfaction. So our survey was clear on why consultants love what they do. 33% reported that using their skills to solve tough problems was at the top of the list. So the key takeaway for us here was that we should ensure early that our consultants are given opportunities to solve problems in interesting ways. So interestingly, we also split this data by gender, and with women, only 33% of them report, or I'm sorry, 33% of them reported that working with colleagues in adjacent functions like sales or finance was what they loved the most, which interestingly was down at number 4 for men. So we also want to understand what can detract from engagement, and staying on top of burnout avoidance is always highly important, but especially during uncertain times. So of the 900 consultants that we surveyed, 52% that reported that unfair allocation or not getting to work on projects of interest were most significant causes of dissatisfaction, which interestingly beat out compensation. So Rachel and David, you both have some interesting strategies for protecting your valuable resources. Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about your solution architects and how you protect yourself from overusing them?
Yeah, definitely, Lindy. So our solution architects are really our scarcest resource on our projects, but they're also in the most demand. So everybody wants to have a strong design upfront in their implementation project, and our solution architects are really instrumental in putting that team together and getting the right design out the door to have a successful implementation. So how do we protect them? Well, the biggest thing that we need to do is to really be smart about how and where we use our solution architects on a project, and also how to grow more solution architects, right? Since I mentioned they are so scarce. So one thing that we've been doing here, especially recently, is taking our solution architects and putting a group of mentees around them. And we put those mentees and that SA, if you will, put them together on a project. So they're learning, but they're also getting the benefit of that billing at the same time that they're learning, right? So that mentorship program is in a billable perspective.
Excellent. Okay, David, can you tell us a little bit about your pacing resources and how you protect them and why it's important to your model?
Yeah, well, actually, listening to what Rachel is saying, it actually attaches to that quite a bit, because the concept of utilization sometimes can be a bit misleading. Specifically, I mean, unless you're, for example, in a pure time and material business where every hour billed, is an hour, obviously that can be invoiced. But otherwise, if you're in a project organization like ours, really the way you generate revenue is by completing projects. So it's in terms of throughput of projects per unit of time. And there, what's important is to maximize the utilization of your pacing resources, like in the case of Rachel, of the solution architects, because they set the cadence at which you can start project, but also complete project in your organization. So the methodology there is the same. You're trying to protect and augment your pacing resource, right? With the caveat that once that pacing resource has been augmented to a certain level, the pacing resource may move to another function on the project. Once again, the bottleneck moves and evolves based on its augmentations and so on. So that's a constant revisiting of what's pacing my throughput in the organization. But the methodology is the same. So we try to maximize the utilization of the pacing resource, in this case, for example, solutions architect, but providing slack capacity and maybe less than optimal utilization, I would say, in the other supporting resources, because those need to be able to adapt to, obviously, to the cadence of the pacing resource. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, David. Okay. So another thing that we pulled from our survey results, building on this theme of protecting valuable and sometimes scarce resources, as Rachel mentioned, it's also important to make sure our resources are spending as much time as possible on the things that interest and challenge them. So finding a strategy for employees to communicate what's working and what they'd like to change is key. We asked those surveyed what would they change about their jobs, and overall 37% of respondents said that having more opportunities to learn new skills was at the top of that list. And further, it was about half, or 48%, of those in the middle of their careers, so ages 35 to 54, that said the same thing. So Rachel and David, let's talk a little bit about strategies that you've enacted to encourage skills development.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that we see here in the survey results is people really don't want to miss out on the opportunities to work on projects that interest them, right? So even if a project's not in their primary skill set, they want that opportunity. And I think we saw earlier, it's not just unfair utilization, but also being underutilized, especially I think it was the women that were really most concerned about that when you look back at the gender differences, which I found kind of interesting. So, one thing that we've been looking to do from our side is to really look for ways to expose those opportunities to our resources and make sure that, if there is a project that's out there that's not part of somebody's primary skill set, that they've got the opportunity to start to work on that project.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Rachel, tell us a little about your PODS program.
Oh, yeah.
And when
yeah, so we talked earlier about the solution architects and the mentees, and what we do from our side is we call those mentorship pods, right? And so that same team of folks that are grouped together on a project, they're going to come with all different skill sets and at all different career levels. And in some cases, I'll talk about this more a little bit later, but in some cases you might have someone who's very senior with one skill set, but that's newer to, say, PSA, right? And so they're coming into maybe more of a mid-level type role on that project, working with a seasoned PSA solution architect. And by bringing those folks together and also having them work together on repeat projects, they're getting a real sense of team camaraderie on that pod and repeat experience together, really working as a team, right? And then the solution architects, what they're doing with some of the folks on that team is they're giving them a chance to, as we say, poke holes above the waterline. So letting some of those consultants have it, an experience on that project where they can take on a safe aspect or a topic of the design, where the solution architect will handle anything that really is going to be critical or detrimental to that project if not handled well.
And are you finding that this kind of model helps with employee satisfaction?
Yeah, definitely. I think, first of all, there's a sense of, I think, stickiness around the teams that's starting to develop, right? So if somebody really looks up to one of these solution architects as a mentor, having that chance to work with them repeatedly on projects is very helpful. And creating that stickiness and that sense of satisfaction. And, everybody wants to feel like they're growing and they're adding value and they're contributing. And you don't want to feel like you're pigeonholed or a cog in the wheel, repeating the same set of skills over and over. So these mentorship pods are giving folks the chance or the opportunity to grow. And I think that really, it increases the sense of that employee satisfaction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. David, talk to us about your strategy to increase the pool of your pacing resources that you were discussing earlier.
Well, kind of as what Rachel said, obviously we agree with the fact that, most resources want to feel that they're contributing and adding value to the project, also that they're evolving in terms of their skills. So usually, we have what I would call more of a traditional coaching mentoring program within the organization, where we, obviously we put people together, but we try to coordinate that and organize that to create those opportunities. We're also very strong believer in what we call shadowing and reverse shadowing projects, where, for example, we will place a resource on a project and they will shadow, for example, the pacing resource, be it a solution architect or whatever pacing resource it may be in that case, to see how they're doing their work, how they're, learning and applying those skills. And then we like to do reverse shadowing, where I would say the candidate, to that kind of function on the project is then observed by by the more experienced person and see how they actually function more independently on those projects. So we try to combine that, but really it's always a combination of several factors. It's the good old traditional discussions that the resource is having with their line managers, a few times a year during the check-in process, in seeing where they are, where they want to be, how they're performing. It's then this coordination with the resource manager where, in light of those preferences, decisions are going to be made about participation in coaching, mentoring, shadowing and reverse shadowing opportunity, or assigning them on projects that are going to be stretching those skills and enabling them to lean into discomfort, within obviously, certain parameters, to be exposed to new elements. So it's a process, I think, that really combines the internal HR processes of resource and skill development with the coordination with line manager and resource manager, and then I would say assigning the people to the projects and opportunities that will really implement those development plans. So it's really a system, right? It's not one thing specifically, but it's kind of the whole organization with the goal of allowing people to grow their skills, add their contribution, and feel more satisfied in the workplace overall.
And do you have a way of tracking this development, or is it, do your employees or resources have a way of interacting with that tracking?
Yeah, so the way we track, obviously certain elements of development plans can be quantifiable, like for example, attend this training, or
Sure.
or be able to do X, Y, and Z. Other elements are, I would say, are evaluated more at the qualitative level, right? So the reverse shadowing, for example, is a great way to qualitatively evaluate the ability of the person to function independently on a project in that role. Likewise, we base that a lot on the discussions between resource managers and employees, engaging the level of comfort, obviously, of the resource in that new role,
Yeah.
as well as comparing that to qualitative and quantitative evaluations that have been made. So, and this combination enables you to say, okay, now that person is at that level and can function at that level. So also putting a person who's not comfortable yet in the role, although you may think that they are ready for it, can sometimes be a bit tricky.
I really
love
like
this idea.
Sorry,
Go ahead,
Lydia.
Rachel. You go.
I love
No,
it too.
go.
Yeah, the concept of reverse shadowing, I think, is important.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love this.
yeah, like, when you're shadowing somebody, that's very passive, right? And you need that chance at some point to demonstrate that skill in a safe capacity, and knowing that you've got someone there, like in our case, the solution architect is
Yeah.
going to be there guiding you, but you're out in front of the customer, let's say, and you're doing more of an active role while you're having that mentor behind the scenes guiding. I think reverse shadowing is a great way to put that, and I think we'll look to implement that formally as well.
And a little even twist, we extend that model also to our partners. So those who would like to be partners of Thales Cloud Protection and Licensing Group, we basically put them through the same process, which is initially they shadow Thales on their deployment of services, and then we do a reverse shadowing of the partner to make sure that the partner functions, at the level of quality that's expected of Thales on customer side. So that's a methodology that can be applied not only to your internal resources, but also to your external resources.
That's fantastic. That's great. All right, we're going to pause for just a moment to kind of continue here talking about skills, and we're going to poll our audience. And we want to know, does your company currently track skills and skill development? So we'll give it just a minute here. All right, Lauren, I'm going to let you determine how much longer we need, and then you can kind of report to us what we're seeing. I'm watching it right now, and it's really actually quite interesting. So if you haven't gotten your answers yet in, get them in. This is great.
Another 10 seconds. I still see some responses coming through.
All right. Okay, so here we are. Yeah, it looks like people are using a skills tracking methodology, and that it has a positive impact, which is of course what we want to see. But what's interesting to me is that 28% down there that says yes, but we aren't using it effectively. And so, this is definitely a point of a strategy rethink. And I think that what Rachel and David are sharing today is super, super helpful to maybe reconsider and rethink about how we're doing this stuff. Great. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Let's move on. Oops. So we're going to talk a little bit here about what folks are looking for in a new job, which was an interesting question in our survey. So understanding what drives those in consulting roles is also an important aspect of recruiting the right people. We always want the best fit skill-wise, of course, right? But understanding how we can keep those new employees engaged and satisfied from the start is a strong team building strategy in the long run. So we asked our consultants what they look for in a new job, and overall 33% reported that a clear career path and development opportunities are at the very top of the list. And then that's followed by 26% reported that the flexibility in where they work, which is interesting. And that's something that's coming up more and more for companies and in the news even, remote work, hybrid work. Are we going back to the office? So that's an interesting call out there as well. If we slice the data by those in their early career, so we're categorizing that ages 18 to 24, 25% of those folks said that they want a healthy environment with values that match their own, which is an interesting answer. That was followed closely by that clear career path and development opportunity at 23%. So Rachel and David, you both have some really interesting strategies to support satisfaction, development, and matched values. Let's dig into that. Rachel, you've mentioned before the concept of work opportunity hubs. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, definitely. So, one thing I think that we've seen, especially in some of the other survey results that you've mentioned, is giving employees some control over their path or their fate and a chance to build those new skills creates that stickiness and that retention that you want in an employee, right? Especially one that you're building up, maybe, they're going down that path of a solution architect, which is a very scarce resource to develop and grow. So we track skills. We use PSA. We track skills in our PSA tool, and we make use of resource requests for our staffing, right? And there's a newer feature called Work Opportunity Hubs in PSA that we're starting to explore and implement. And the cool thing about Work Opportunity Hubs is those resource requests that you might have on a project that need a certain primary skill set, you can sort of post those as an internal job board for your employees. And you can give folks a chance to, say, hey, I'm interested in this. Maybe it's not really my primary skill set, but this excites me and I want to grow and I want to learn this skill and be part of this project. And that's really helpful also in increasing utilization in a sense, right? If you've got somebody sitting on a bench, you're kind of creating a self-service tool that they can use where they can go to the Work Opportunity Hub and see what's out there, what's available that might interest them and how they can engage on that project. And having this sense of going back to the pods, right? Having this sense of a mentorship pod means that they don't need to know that skill to join that project. What they need is to have a very experienced solution architect mentoring them on that project where they learn that new skill set.
Mhm.
It also occurs to me that it's not something we necessarily discussed in the survey, but this idea of autonomy and this sense of self-worth, if employees are able to engage with that and call out what they want, that certainly increases that ability and sense of autonomy.
Yeah.
David,
Yeah.
oh, go
And
ahead, Rachel. Yeah,
it empowers the consultants. You saw people, they want to
totally.
they want to have some impact over their utilization. So if somebody's hungry for more work or a different type of work, they can go out and they can kind of seize the reins on their fate.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
David, how do you think about development plans as a retention tool?
Well, development plans are central, to the strategy. Within Cal CPL, we also run our own employee satisfaction survey. Sorry, to kind of also see what's important to our employees in terms of their everyday work and so on. And so the development plans, and more specifically, training plans and development opportunities are always very central to that. So I mentioned coaching and mentoring earlier, right, which is an important element of that strategy to make those opportunities available, but also, more, I would say, formal opportunities for not only training on Thales products and services, and we have a wide range of products in different security technologies within CPL, but also external training and so on. And actually, in order to be able to really gauge and quantify, how much time we're investing in that, we're actually using even PSA to do it. We've created like different projects within PSA to track actually the level of effort and the nature of the training programs that our employees undertake, so that we can quantify it. We can track it against internal targets that we have as to how many hours of training each employee should be accumulating over a year, so that if people are lagging behind in their training objectives, we can actually have the line managers discuss that with them and put plans in place that are a bit more, a bit clearer, as well as in some cases, other situation. But like everything else, you can't manage what you can't measure, right? So
Sure.
if you're going to be setting up objectives regarding the training and the development opportunities, try to quantify it, try to establish targets, and then track your performance against those targets. We make that information available to the entire management staff so that in real time, literally on a monthly basis, they can monitor how their different resources are tracking against their training and development objectives. But that's a very important element of the strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Some more survey results. Optimizing utilization and resource allocation have emerged as great ways to protect the bottom line. There's certainly a range of ways that we see services companies approaching utilization and how it promotes growth. So we asked our survey respondents how they would accelerate business results. And overall, the answer was clear. 40% reported that the answer is to improve allocation to get more from the people that they have in place. And this was compounded as we slice the data for senior management and leaders. 63% reported that allocation is the answer as well. So this actually was the key finding from our survey. So Rachel, you have a fascinating observation on prioritizing utilization over hourly rates. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the best way to look at this is to just ask ourselves a question, like what's more expensive to a company? Having that highly skilled resource out there sitting on a bench for a few weeks where they're billing nothing, right? And that time is gone. You can never get that time back once that few weeks has transpired. Or taking a highly skilled resource and maybe inserting them into one of these pods I talked about earlier as a mid-level consultant for that same set of, that same few weeks. So what I really am saying we're doing here is we're prioritizing revenue and utilization over margins, right? So maybe we're taking a more expensive resource, in other words, and we're inserting them into that mid-level role.
Sure.
Actually doing that with an understanding that we'd rather keep them busy at that level than lose that time because they're out there sitting on a bench for those few weeks. And, I
Yeah.
guess to add to that, that really is a win-win for us and, as a company, for the employee, because they stay busy, and also for the customer, right? Because the customer ends up getting a more experienced consultant. They may not be, let's say they're not a PSA expert, but maybe they've got 15, 20 years experience at the solution architect level working on something else out there on the Salesforce platform, right? So they're coming in with a lot of the soft skills you need to succeed as an experienced consultant. And then they're working in more of a mid-level role just simply because they haven't had all that exposure with PSA. So a customer gets a higher quality or caliber of consultant that's working on their project as well.
Just sounds also to me like just another point of improved satisfaction. And of course, we do know that when employees are engaged and satisfied, our customer satisfaction goes up as a result. David, your business is not really subject to time and material restrictions. So tell us a little bit more about your needs, sometimes to actually have lower utilization to create the necessary slack in the system.
Yeah, so well, the goal is not to create slack, but the goal is to really, maximize the throughput of the organization. That is the number of projects that we complete, per year, per quarter, because obviously that's the engine of revenue generation for us. A lot of, depends how you invoice, but a lot of our projects are, for example, invoiced upon completion. So for us, obviously, getting to the completion is important, in terms of the pace of that. I think that acceleration and throughput optimization of an organization is primarily achieved actually in the proper control of the pace at which you start new projects. Very often, and sometimes, an invoicing strategy can lead you down the wrong path there. For example, if you say, well, I'm going to be invoicing 50% of the project upfront and 50% at the end, there's almost a carrot to start the project too early, right? Because you get that payoff. The problem with that is, and we've seen it time and time again, and it's a tough one to manage for most organizations, is to pace yourself in the start of the project, which also translates to the commitments to the customer, to how you manage those expectations and so on. But the purpose of that is to maintain flow in your organization. If you release work or you start projects too quickly, you create congestion, right? And now you have resources that are multitasking frenetically across different projects. And unfortunately, what that translates to are projects timeline that are extending, deliverables that are being missed, escalations, dissatisfied customers, and so on. So there is almost an art to it, right? And a lot of it is based, what I mentioned, quite simply on a pacing resource, can be a mechanism that allows you to determine how you're going to manage that. But I think that most people will relate to that. I've got too many projects running at the same time. I'm juggling too many tasks, and you know exactly how that translates. It translates into burnout of employees. It translates into stress. It translates into decreasing quality of the work. We've all been in those situations. And what the origin of all of that is usually the mechanism that launches new project in the system. So I would say that if organization can actually focus on one thing, is in order to accelerate their throughput and as a result, accelerate their revenue, is really rethink what they're trying to optimize, right? If you're focusing purely, unless you're on time and material, but if you're focusing purely on optimizing utilization, it will lead you to potentially congested systems because you're not making the difference between what's a pacing resource, what's a supporting resource. You're trying to maximize the utilization of everyone, and it leads to congestion. Like what Rachel was talking about earlier, you've got a few people on the bench, right? You've got to be able to tolerate that in some cases. right? Because the time is not right to start a new project. Our organization will say, well, I've got a couple people on the bench. It's not a complete team, but might be enough to start this new project, and the others will catch up. So if you're trying to do that, you will once again create that congestion with a lot of negative elements. I would say if you find yourself at one point, there's a few people on the workbench, use those opportunities maybe for, and here we're going to relate back to development plans for training, maybe for internal initiative or improvement initiative project that those people would like to contribute to, right? Maybe reworking a process, or reworking a template for a deliverable to a customer, things that they've been wanting to do but never had the time to do. You know, if you can have those interesting improvement initiatives that are lined up as part of the annual development plan, those are some of the things that they can contribute to if they find themselves in that situation of being less utilized.
Yeah, sure. That makes a lot of sense.
And David,
Okay.
I was just thinking about this question, and I think Tiffany asked it as well in the Q&A, but sometimes we're really eager to move quickly on that project and increase that throughput so that, you know, we can keep that team of mentorship pod folks, you know, keep them together for the next project. But what can happen is the client can be slow. Maybe that's their culture, right? And, you know, Tiffany's asking, I don't know if you see it there, but she's asking how you deal with that. And, you know, how do you really motivate the client? Because it's not just our teams of consultants that are responsible for the throughput, but also client responsiveness.
No,
Absolutely.
definitely. And it takes two to tango, right? I mean, in order to achieve speed, you know, and speed with quality, you definitely need to have a customer that's willing to support that, most definitely.
Fantastic. All right, finally, we're going to round this out here. Our survey looked into how we can make more from the hours we have for sale, which this also produced a pretty clear answer with the survey. Overall, our respondents told us that making project allocation processes more efficient was the way they'd be able to charge more for their services. Senior managers and leaders agreed with this. 40% of them reported that allocation efficiency was the answer. So Rachel and David, let's round this talk out with a chat about optimizing the hours that we have for sale. So Rachel, help listeners distinguish between project margins and business margins.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with how we're prioritizing, you know, when we talk about our KPIs at our company, utilization over margins, right? So what do I mean by margin there? Well, we have our Certinia practice, and we have groups of resources who I talked about. They're not traditionally maybe a part of that practice, right? Maybe they're in another practice, they're very senior, but they're going to be helping out on a project where, although they're an expensive resource, they're going to be contributing maybe more at the mid-level, so they can gain a new skill, and so that they can, we can improve our utilization by keeping them off of the bench. So what's happening there at the group level or at the project level, if you look at the margins on that project, then that, the margins may go down, right? And what I mean by that is you have a more expensive resource billing, right? So you're not able to keep as much of that margin, right? But the practice itself, if you look at the practice or the company as a whole, the margins are improving. And why is that? Well, again, it's more expensive in a sense to keep an expensive resource sitting on the bench and have that time allowance, right? Than it is to put them on a project where maybe they're not going to be, they're going to be increasing the utilization for the project and the group and the practice as a whole, but the margins that we're taking back for the hours that they're working may not be as good, right? So, just think about, I guess, the house cost of that resource might be the project margin is how you're calculating that. Maybe the project margins will go down, but the business margins will go up overall because you're able to bill for that time that would have otherwise, elapsed, and you can never get it back.
Sure. And David, if throughput is your key metric, what does optimization look like?
That's a very good question. So So optimization, I would say ultimately is in a system that's throughput based would be based on how well you're able to exploit that pacing resource, right? That's really at the end of the day, that's it. And trying to, the optimization comes in protecting that pacing resource and avoiding any tasks or any demands on their time and attention that could be delegated to other functions. And it's actually a very interesting exercise once you identify those that element of throughput and that pacing resource, to really analyze the work that those people are doing and assisting them with prioritization, protection of their time, and so on. In prior organizations, because I've been using some of those concepts before as well, we even had visual signs of protection, where at the time we were in an open cubicle environment, and we would actually place a little red flag on top of the cubicle. And the red flag was basically, this is a protected resource. This resource is it's key to a deliverable at this moment. Do not bother them. So if you want to invite them to a meeting, if you want to ask them a question, postpone that. But it becomes a respect for the person's time, right? And
Sure.
And a question of where the person's time is going to be most valuable at that moment of the project. So you can have fun with that, right? You can, but the
Absolutely.
idea is one of protection and making sure that their time goes there. So that's really the optimization comes there. If your pacing resource is busy doing things that are not contributing specifically to their pacing function, then you have a little bit more optimization work to do.
Absolutely. Well, Rachel and David, I could keep talking about this and asking you questions. This has been really fascinating and informative, but unfortunately we have run out of time. So we are going to shift right before, we're going to do some question and answers. We've left some time, but first thing we're going to do is ask our audience one more poll question. So Lauren, do you want to give them a couple minutes to fill this out, and then we'll jump to question and answers. So the demo we're offering today, for those of you in the audience, is specifically our advanced resource management capabilities, which is probably the most popular capability that we have in our PSA solution for our enterprise customers. All right, Lauren, thank you so much for that. Let's go ahead and look at some of these questions. We do have a couple here. So let's see. What tool, all three of you or your company, what are you using for skills assessments?
Well, I think the obvious answer would be Certinia, right? And, how are we using it? So, David, I'll let you talk about that. Linda, I'm sure you're using it at Certinia as well. But what we do is we periodically throughout the year, or even as consultants earn certifications or ramp up their skills, we ask them to go into PSA and to enter that as a skill rating or a cert rating. And then we have a review or an approval process, right, where we validate that, they're not, I guess, blowing hot air at us, or they actually certification they've given. But, again, we've made that as self-service as possible to empower consultants to share with us all these wonderful skills that they're growing and new certs that they're acquiring. David, any thoughts there?
It's pretty much the same thing. We're using Certinia skills and certification capabilities, obviously, to quantify that. We actually don't do it self-serve, although that sounds great. We like to do it via the line manager for the for some of the verification aspects that you're referring to. I would say that probably the most challenging thing that we've had actually when it comes to skills and certification is to find the right balance in terms of the details there of skills and certification. At one point, we were just kind of letting it grow, and we ended up with a massive list of different skills and certification, and it became harder to use it effectively, right? More specifically, for example, at the moment that we create or resource request with skill request, we have one part of the professional services organization that does that. That's our pre-sales organization. And if pre-sales has a list of 150 skills to pick from, you know, they will tend to go back to a couple of key skills that they know how to enter, you know, via the skill requirements. And the same issue was true of our resource managers. You know, there were too many skills, and some were too detailed and were not useful, really. And because one of the things for us that's really interesting later on, and this is where the combination with Salesforce comes in, is when we look at a pipeline of sales opportunity, is not only look at the pipeline in terms of you know, close date and amount and so on, but it's to look at the pipeline in terms of skill demand, right? Because if you've been able to add your resource request with the skills requirement to your pipeline, then you know you can translate the pipeline in terms of skills demand. And there also, it was important for us to kind of limit the number of skills that could be maybe specified in that process in order for the information to be useful. So right now, and I can tell you that this is a constant of continuous improvement for us, is to find a proper balance in the details of the skill list.
And David, it's interesting, you know, us being self-service, not that we're not opening the door for consultants to go out and enter a bunch of new types of skills. It's more the skill ratings. However, we're facing that same challenge that you mentioned, is we have like a large number of skills and which ones are really important or primary. And one thing that we've started to do is to look at, well, which skills are actually implicit in the role that someone's playing on the project. For example, you know, eliciting requirements. Well, you would expect that 100% of our solution architects in that project role are going to be able to do that. That's not the primary skill set that they need to bring to the table for that resource request. And so, you know, we're starting to look at that and break that down, you know, in the same way it sounds like that you've already done.
Yeah, so it can be challenging. And once again, we're iterating on that for sure. Yeah.
Great. And I'm just going to briefly say, yes, of course, Certinia uses Certinia for our skills assessment, tracking, and management. I have one more question that I'd like to answer. It looks like a couple of these questions got answered within our discussion, but one more question in here. It's going to be a little plug from me. Do you invite people via email to do the survey that we conducted? We do. Actually, we have, for the enterprise segment specifically, we've deployed a resourcing health check journey. And that part of that journey includes actually being a participant in our market research survey. And so if you're interested in that, the follow-up email that you'll get from this webinar will include a recording as well as the full report of this survey and an opportunity to participate in that health check journey. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or go ahead and sign up for that health check journey and we'll get you started. Okay, and with that, I want to say thank you so much again to Rachel and David. This really was great. We're already getting feedback saying that people are loving this session. So thank you so much. The insight has been wonderful. And I hope that we get to have a conversation like this again sometime soon.
You're welcome.
So much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.